until the Allied armies enter Metz. Many of the organizers of our North African victories were gathered at the airfield to welcome the organizer-in-chief. As usual, Dr. Goebbels had proclaimed that the Premier was in all sorts of places at once after his visit to Washington. It must have been quite a surprise to find out too late just where he really was. The Foreign Secretary and the Chief of the Imperial General Staff were with the Premier on this visit. He'd come to see the men who won the Battle of Africa, to thank them personally on behalf of everybody at home. He also called in on an American unit. Airmen and troops from the United States, in cooperation with our own boys, have shown the Axis just what hard fighting really means. Now it's Italy's turn, and while the land forces prepare for the bigger battles yet to come, American airmen are helping to keep up the blitz on the luckless Duce. American men and American planes have played a big part in driving the Axis out of Africa. They will play a greater part still in the final European assault. True to form, the Premier rang the changes on his suitings and headgear several times. Panama hat, sun helmet, white ducks and siren suit all had their moments during an exhaustive tour. He crossed the Majerda River by an army bridge hastily built by sappers to replace the stone one blown up by the Germans when they retreated. Then, accompanied by General Anderson, he went to Carthage, scene of so many battles. In the ruins of the Roman amphitheater, he addressed a gathering of some 3,000 troops, congratulating and thanking them for the resounding defeat they handed out to Hitler's swaggering African armies. He continued his travels in General Alexander's famous white car. Since Alamein, this same car has been driven often enough through streets lined with enthusiastic townspeople, but never can it have known a warmer welcome than our troops gave to the Premier. He traveled many miles, he saw many men and made many speeches from many different kinds of platforms. Mr. Eden took his share as well, and the very Allied audiences certainly showed their appreciation of this double visit. Wherever the Premier went, it was the same story. The troops put as much energy into the cheering as they had done into the fighting. 3 cheers were simply not enough. In Tunis, Mr. Churchill paused in his travels to inspect one of the famous Tiger tanks, a 62-ton monster captured by the First Army in the fighting for the town. Hitler thought his Tigers were unbeatable. Our Churchills and the American Shermans soon showed him just how wrong he was. Lunch was taken at RAF headquarters. Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder and Air Vice Marshal Coningham did the honours, and I'd hazard a guess that plans for future offensive action by the North African Air Forces were under discussion. Pleasant as these diversions must have been to the Premier, there was still work to be done. One of his many tasks was presiding at a press conference held in a garden. Much to Mr. Churchill's amusement, this place of honour was a rather theatrical-looking raised throne. He was in excellent spirits and gave the journalists an optimistic survey of the war situation. And there were conferences, such as this one, attended by Generals Marshal, Eisenhower, Alexander, and other Allied leaders. Whatever was decided here and in Washington, time alone will prove. But we may be certain that it bodes no good for Hitler and co. Allied victory may still be a long way off, but now the Axis know that we mean business, and at last we have the means at our disposal to carry out the task. No doubt remains about the outcome of the war. Long ago, the Prime Minister promised us blood, tears and sweat, crowned by final victory. Ultimate victory is at last in sight, and we can recognize how much we owe to the dogged resolution, the unconquerable spirit of Winston Churchill.